Hi and welcome to Leitrim Daily. My name is Breifne early. It is Kiss My Arts today, and I am with one of Leitrim's adopted budding writers. It seems to be something that happens quite regularly in this county. People move here from outside of the county, outside of the country even, and they end up deciding to take pen to paper to tell people all about life in our beautiful part of the world. And today's guest is no different. Faye Hayden, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Faye, tell us a little bit about yourself. You're obviously not, as people will hear from your accent very quickly, you're not from this part of the world, but you have settled and become part of the furniture here at County Leitrim.
I have very much. I moved here in 2002. I was working for MBNA over in Chester at the time, and I was born and grew up in North Wales. And I came over here as a manager on a 2-year contract, but part of the big cliche, I met my husband, who was also working for MBNA. He had moved down from Dublin, and the rest is history. We now have 3 children and a collection of chaotic animals. And my parents also moved over to be with us 4 years ago as well. So it's a bit of a family affair.
So even though you no longer work in MBNA or Avantcard as it is today, you're still in the area.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
What made you stay when the work dried up?
My husband still works there. My husband works in Avantcard, but I really would be loath to leave Leitrim, to be honest. My chief bridesmaid, who is my best friend from college, did a speech at our wedding, and she said that, in a very loving way, that Ireland you can keep up because this is where she's home. And it's very, very true. I became an Irish citizen back in 2012. My youngest daughter is called Erin because we first saw her on the scan the day I became an Irish citizen, and I call it home. I just felt like I fit from the day that I moved here, and we would go to Dublin quite a lot. That's where my husband's from, but I couldn't live in Dublin. It's a great city, don't get me wrong, but Leitrim's just lovely, as the song would say.
I'm interested in why you would want to become an Irish citizen, because I suppose as a native of Wales or the UK, you would have had an EU passport. So why go through that process of becoming an Irish citizen? Did it really mean that much to you?
Oh yeah, absolutely, really, really did. And I'd planned on becoming an Irish citizen back in 2007. My daughter Saoirse was born at the end of 2006, and I had all the forms filled in, but I just never had the time to go to the Commissioner for Oaths and get them signed, and they lay in a drawer, as many people will tell you, and things get piled on top of them, and it got forgotten about. And then it came around that no, I really wanted to do it, and I felt so connected in Ireland and felt such a part of it. And people always say to me, well, who do you support in the rugby when Wales are playing Ireland? And it's always Ireland. I've never felt a greater connection to anywhere that I've been, and I've done a fair bit of traveling, so it feels like home, and I wanted to make it a bit more official. My UK passport was about to run out. My husband was delighted to get the British passport out of the house and an extra Irish one in, so everybody was happy.
Fair enough. There's a few homes that I realised that was a very big issue in the county. In terms of your professional career, you spent a couple of years with MBNA, yes. And then where did you go from there?
I took a career break then because my youngest daughter was just nearly a year old, and I was starting to see some challenges in my son, who's our middle child, so I just wanted to spend some time really more at home with the family. But I got itchy feet very quickly. I don't like just feeling like I have not so much to do, so I started volunteering with Breifne. I'd been doing bits and pieces with them for years, but I did more volunteering and got more involved in what they were doing, and then I ended up working with them for a year. And then at the end of that, I moved on and I worked for a social justice charity up in Sligo called Sligo Social Services. So they would work with local homeless people, resettled refugees, they offer childcare and maybe the lower income households, after school care, various different things like that. So yeah, I did that for 3 years, which I absolutely loved. But then I gave up work at the beginning of this year because my son has autism and ADHD, and I found that there was a lot of appointments, there was a lot going on. He wasn't settling at school, so it was doing shorter days, and I just needed to be at home more.
So in terms of your professional career, that went on the back burner at the start of the year, as you said, but you didn't stay idle for long. Like you said, itchy feet.
This time it was itchy fingers, and I just kind of thought, right, I'm going to do a bit of writing. I have a very energetic German Shepherd who I would, walk every day, and I would be thinking and planning and trying to figure things out in my head. And, I'm not going to lie, being a parent to a child with the kind of needs that my son has can be very, very challenging. And I was feeling very low. My mental health was struggling. And I thought, right, I'm going to take some of these thoughts out of my head and I'm going to put them on paper and I'm going to try and figure them out. I'm going to try and organize them. And I found that very therapeutic. But I then saw the 10-year challenge on Facebook, where you had to post your photograph from 2009 and your photograph from 2019.
That can be quite daunting.
It was, yes, it really can. And for some people, it's great. A lot of my friends and people that I used to know back in the UK are aging very, very well. I'm not. So the photo was, I suppose, a bit of a wake-up call. I knew I'd been gaining weight, but I look back at my 2009 photo where I was maybe verging on a yummy mummy kind of look, with 2 small children, and it's still at a focus on that, whereas now so much energy goes into being a good mummy. There's no time really for anything else. And in the last few years particularly, since turning 40 really, I've gained 4 stone and I have more cups in my bra than an ICA coffee morning. So I decided, right, what's actually gone on that's made this huge difference in that 10 years? And what I was writing started to take on more of a structure of my 10-year challenge and the things that had gone on in that 10 years. And I don't want it to be all doom and gloom. It certainly hasn't been all doom and gloom. But I think the most difficult part has been my son's diagnosis, but also the many years in the lead up to that and the challenges that come with that. But then also that, the families have faced into, there's been miscarriage, there's been, difficult times. I've lost friends. A lot of my good friends have, been sick, a variety of different things that I think affect us as we start to get that little bit older and those real grown-up things in life. And then there's just the everyday things. I had a crisis really over celeriac, the root vegetable, because I'm doing a low-carb diet and I suddenly went into panic about how many carbs are actually in it. And then I've many animals that drive me a little bit crazy, or sorting socks on a Sunday, filling in forms. There are those normal everyday things. And what I was doing with my writing was, whilst I was trying to find some ideas on how I was feeling the way I was, or how to improve the way I was feeling, I was actually starting to try and see the funny side of things. And it made me realise that we all have to try and do that a little bit, because a lot of the time with life, if you don't laugh, you will cry. And there are some days then that you might not stop. So the book kind of took a bit of a humorous twist, and it's continued in that vein.
And that, of course, brings us to your first book.
Yes.
Bedtime Stories for Mothers and Others.
Yes.
Now, I mistakenly thought this was a children's book.
No, it is not.
But it's not. It's very much bedtime stories for adults.
Yes.
But not in that
not in a 50 Shades of Grey kind of way, no. Sadly not. My life is not that exciting.
Tell us a bit about the book and I suppose what it's about and who it's for, really.
Yeah, the book is split into 5 sections, and it's introducing myself, my family and other animals, because I do have a menagerie of other animals. And then it does talk about the more serious things that have gone on in our life in the last 10 years, particularly around Patrick's autism diagnosis, our struggle to get support for that, because as many people will know, in rural Ireland, supports via the health service and via education are sadly lacking. And then just looking at that side of things, but then taking a look at the lighter side of things. So that sock monster, that celeriac crisis, a variety of different things that I think will just resonate with people. We've all had that morning where we're rushing to a meeting and the car won't start, or the sat-nav goes crazy and drives us in the wrong direction. Those things that have the potential to push us over the edge, because they're the thing that broke the straw that broke the camel's back. Even though they might seem like just a small thing at the time, there might be other things going on for you. But it's taking a fun look at that. Then around body image, like I say, I've gained a lot of weight. I have a set of luggage under my eyes. My hair just won't do as it's told. So we took a little bit of a look at that. And then the final piece is, the final section is called Buying a Good Bra, which is really about your support system. So it's about my friends, my family, the people in my life that have got me through the last 10 years, that we've all helped each other out because we've all needed to, and how important that support is. And that's really what it's all about. So it's aimed, with the title, you'd think it's just for mums. It isn't. My tagline with it is, there are no boobies or babies required. A lot of my friends that don't have children have read it and have said it's really good and enjoyed it and they can connect with it. gentlemen, you're welcome to read it. I don't know that it will resonate quite as much, but I'm an equal opportunities writer and I want everybody to have the opportunity to read it. And particularly maybe part 2, if there are any special needs parents out there, any special needs dads, granddads. My dad reads it. My dad thinks it's quite funny, even though he's in it sometimes. He doesn't like those bits quite so much. But yeah, there's an opportunity for anyone and everyone to read it.
Have you fallen out with anybody?
No, not yet. But my husband hasn't read all of it. There is an interesting chapter in there called erectile dysfunction. So his eyebrows did raise a little bit when I mentioned that chapter, but it's not quite as it seems. You'll have to read it.
That's about your boyfriend, not your husband.
Absolutely, yeah. That's my other husband.
They might not be happy with that either.
No.
In terms of the actual book, how do you envisage that someone will actually read this? Because as you said, it's a collection of short stories. It's a collection of bedtime stories, as you say. Is it a thing that you pick it up maybe, I don't know, on the toilet or sitting down for a cup of coffee or in bed at night? Then you just read one before you go to sleep, put yourself to sleep? It's not going to put you to sleep, though, is it?
I dropped my new phone down the toilet a few weeks ago, so I would highly recommend reading my book rather than your phone on the toilet. But anyway, you want to read it. It is short tales. None of the chapters should take you any more than 10 minutes to read. The time of an average bedtime story that you might be reading to a child, really. And you can read it anywhere and everywhere. My 2 test readers both read it in one sitting. They said they couldn't put it down, which is fantastic feedback that I think every writer wants to get. But you can just dip in and out of it. I would recommend reading part 1 and part 2 before reading anything else, and then because they do follow maybe, I suppose, more of a timeline. But then beyond that, you can just dip in and out of it wherever you want to.
Fantastic. You are a self-published author, as a number of our guests over the series has been. Tell us a bit about your experience of that process, because I think there might be somebody sitting at home who used to write as a teenager, hasn't picked up a pen or sat down at a Microsoft Word document to write a book or even thought about it, but would love the idea of it and just hasn't done it. How has the writing process worked for you?
I suppose at the very beginning, I was just brain dumping my feelings and brain dumping the way that I was, everything that was going on in my life at that time. And then I put a little bit of structure around it and turned it into what I viewed more as a book that did have that little bit more structure. Then I actually turned it into a blog, which is also the same title. You can follow it on Facebook or on Twitter, which is Bedtime Stories for Mothers and Others. And that links into my website, which is fayehayden.life. And I've been writing the pieces, trialing out the pieces on the blog. And there's a couple of other bits on there as well. But the edit, I think, is the hardest part, is you've written all of this stuff and you've actually then got to decide, well, is actually all of this stuff something everybody wants to read? And some of it isn't that great. So you have to be very, very honest with yourself and just pull it apart and decide, is somebody going to stick with this if it is 500 pages? Is somebody going to carry this around in their handbag if it's 500 pages? Probably not. So you need to, very much be able to condense it and to pick up the best of it and to really cut back on all the ands, ifs and buts that are in there. And then I've been working with a lady called Coach Karen Brown, who helped me set up my website, and she has self-published a lot of journals. She would do a lot of life coaching and the journals. So she's been working with me on self-publishing, which was very straightforward, very, I suppose, cost-effective in the sense that you're not spending an absolute fortune and it might not work out. I'm very realistic about this. I might sell 10 copies to my mum and that'll be it. But so you don't want to be putting yourself in a real position where, you might financially break yourself, which obviously isn't something any of us want to do. So I've gone through the process with Karen and I got in touch then with a few local booksellers. I'm just in negotiation with one in Sligo at the moment, but the book will be being carried in the Reading Room in Carrick. It'll also be available then on Amazon and through my website. So it just felt like the right way for me to go. I'm a bit of a kind of all or nothing kind of person, and this has been drifting along through the year. I'm put on a bit of a back burner as we've been sorting things out for my family. And then I read on Facebook back in October that there were only 8 weeks left to go of the decade, and what are we going to do to make a difference? And so I thought, right, well, yeah, that's it. I'm going to print my book and we'll see. My hope is that it will raise awareness of life with autism, but I don't want to preach to people. You know, I do enough of that down the pub or on Facebook and that kind of thing, or to my friends. They've all kind of an off switch for me now. So I don't want to do that, but I want to raise awareness so that just to make people stop and think a little bit and understand what does go on for an autistic person and for their families. You know, because my son's autism doesn't just affect him. It affects my 2 other children. It affects us. It affects his grandparents. It affects everybody. So it's just to raise a little bit of awareness about that and to make people stop and think about what small differences they can make to improve life for autistic people, but also for other parents and for other people to look at it and think, God, yeah, do you know what? Life is actually quite hard sometimes. It's not the fairy tale that it is on TV or that it is on social media or that it is than we imagined when we were growing up, but we can actually get through it, and let's try and have a little bit of a laugh about it. Some things aren't funny, but you can usually find the funny side of most things, and that's what's helped me to maintain my sanity the last couple of years, I think.
That's fantastic. In terms of the mechanics of the actual self-publishing process.
Yes.
So when you had this idea you want to write a book, where did you go from there? Like,
to be honest, I was very, very lucky that I had Coach Karen Brown working with me, because she's helped me an awful lot through that. And we use the self-publishing tool on Amazon. So, you have to then focus on things like your book cover to make sure that you're using a cover that isn't copyrighted. There are things then... But there is a 12-step guide on Amazon with pictures for those of you that are kind of the more visual learners that will just talk you through it and teach you how to do it. So it is very straightforward. I would then recommend trying to get some media attention in it, starting off obviously with your local media and your local newspaper, even
local podcast,
absolutely. Everything that I have done, I suppose, has been including friends to start off with. So getting friends to share your blog posts and just slowly building and building and building. And it is very much like that. You know, there's a lot of very good local coaches or local kind of business instructors. And I went to the Women in Enterprise Day that was run by the local enterprise office there back in October. And I found that really good and really motivational. And you just make contacts. I made contacts there with a couple of other bloggers. And there's a lady, Val Robush, she's the Magnum lady up in Sligo. And she's giving me loads of tips and loads of ideas. And it really is just that bouncing ideas off each other and talking to other people. And it is that networking. When I finished my role in MBNA, I did a course on how to, obtain a new job or a new career. And they said that in rural communities, 70% of new opportunities will come through networking. So it is just that making connections. And I love people. I love chatting. I love talking to people, finding out their stories. So I suppose that lent itself to being able to make new connections and meet new people and do it that way.
Absolutely. That's our experience here. Like, we have a number of staff here and we didn't advertise for a single one of them. We just happened to know somebody with a certain skill set and approach them and
it's a perfect fit then, and you know what you're getting into. It's like a good childminder. You want to know that they've got the right skills for your child.
How has that been, actually? Because obviously with a son with different needs than your other kids, how has it been in terms of childminding, babysitters? Has that been a challenge?
It's been a mixed bag, I suppose. Patrick did go to mainstream creche when he was younger. He wasn't actually diagnosed until he was 9, although from the age of about 18 months to 2, I just knew that there was something. Couldn't have told you what. I really didn't think it was autism at the time, but I did know something was just different. And he went to local creches. He was fine. I always smile when I think when he was in Montessori up in Annaduff, he would be there in the afternoons when I was at work. So he only worked part-time, but I worked 3 full days. And in the afternoons, he would go and spend his time in the baby room and he would sing to the babies and he would play with the babies. And that's really cute. But with hindsight, I now know that he was struggling to socially connect, even at the age of 4, at the other 4-year-olds in his room. And it's very common for a person with autism to gravitate towards younger children or more towards adults because they're able to connect more on that kind of level. So I suppose that was a sign back then. I have an absolutely amazing carer for Patrick that helps us out, because sometimes we do just need that little bit of respite, even if it's just for a few hours in the afternoon that I can sit with Erin and do her homework or sit and chat to see about her day went, because she's just started secondary school. So we're just making sure that transition works out well. And her oldest child has autism too. He's an adult now and living over in the UK.
That's the carer, it's not your daughter's.
No, sorry, yes. That's the carer. But she's fantastic, and she just totally gets Patrick. She was the only other person when Patrick was small, because she used to mind him a little bit when he was small as well. She was the only other person that saw something was different. And, you know, this is the one thing I really didn't want to be right about, but we were right. And, you know, there's recent studies now have been shown that, it was a psychologist actually telling me this recently, that teams of doctors now are starting to listen more to parents, because in 85% of cases, if a parent, particularly a mother, has an inkling that there's something different going on with their child, they are actually right. So, it's huge.
Fortunately or unfortunately.
Fortunately or unfortunately. Do you know, people often, I've written about this in the book, and people think it's strange when you are almost happy when you receive your diagnosis. It's not that you particularly want your child to face challenges, but you often get to the point where, I mean, we've been going through the system for over 4 years when Patrick got his diagnosis, and you're absolutely tearing your hair out. I've been back to college to do special educational needs training. I've done occupational therapy training. We've done dietitians. We did essential oils. We did alternative therapies. I've done 4 parenting courses. You know, you do all of these things and you become obsessed, and nothing really is changing anything. And you kind of get to the point where, at least when you have your diagnosis, and I don't consider it a label, because labels are for tins of beans, they're not for people. It's a diagnosis, and that diagnosis is there to support Patrick's care so that we can truly understand what's going on for him, and work with him and work with professionals to get the support that he needs. So in a lot of ways, it's actually a relief. And for me, and I think for a lot of parents, particularly mums that I've spoken to, you spend so long convinced that you're just a really bad parent, even though you're trying your best to do everything. So when you get that diagnosis, it actually validates you a little bit to say, well, yeah, there was actually something going on. It wasn't just me. I wasn't being overprotective. I'm not a helicopter parent. But I just knew that there was something, that my child needed something different. So, and Patrick also, along with Erin, his younger sister, they go to the Hunt School in Mohill, which is a smaller school, and it's just an absolutely amazing school. And we are completely blessed. His SNA, Roisin, is just, she's out of this world. She's fantastic. So, and he just connects with her so well. And she's another person that just gets him. She just knows how he works. She spots his triggers straight away. So we're very lucky in that regard. And then as well, my parents moved over here 4 years ago to support us. And I really do not know how we could have got through the last 4 years without them, to be honest. So, you know, they will take Patrick when he's at his most challenging, because they know that we just can't do it anymore in that moment in time, or that the girls need a break, or so that's just been invaluable to have them here.
So in terms of the experiences you've gained over the last 10 or 11 years with Patrick, or probably more specifically the last couple of years since his diagnosis, they're in this book for other people to maybe learn the tricks, or the fact that it's not your fault sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely, that it's not your fault, and to remind yourself of that sometimes, but also to remember that it's not the child's fault either. I mean, Patrick has, when you have autism, the new piece now is that you have a profile within that autism. I always thought profiles were for Tinder, and he's a bit young for that yet. But no, seemingly you have profiles in autism as well. And Patrick has 2 distinct profiles, which are a pathological demand avoidance profile and an oppositional defiance disorder profile. And what that basically means is his anxiety is so severe that he tries to avoid doing the normal everyday tasks that people would do. And that isn't just necessarily school or going to the supermarket. That could be something as simple as putting your socks on. Yeah. And that's not that the socks irritate his feet. It's just that he finds it so difficult to do that, because putting his socks on means he has to put his shoes on, and that means we have to leave the house and we have to go to school. So, and the oppositional defiance disorder then would be, a lot of people call it BOLD, thinking that it is just a bold child, but it isn't. It's a child that has an actual need within their brain to gain your attention in any way possible. So they will do the absolute opposite of what you need them to do, sometimes in a dangerous or what would seem to be a naughty way, but they need the chemical release of your that comes when they get your reaction. And so that's, you really have to recondition yourself, really, I suppose, in the way that you parent. And it is difficult when your child is really acting out and being extremely difficult. Patrick swears a lot and he's very verbally abusive. And that can be really hard to try and remember this isn't actually his fault, and just not want to scream back at him and be angry. And because I am angry. I think a lot of parents that are in this position are angry that this is what we're dealing with. And for so long, we've had to deal with it alone. There are very, very limited services out there. We're actually have an external intervention at the moment supporting our family. And we're one of the first families in Ireland to get that. And that did not come easily. We had to fight for that. I have sat in HSE buildings 3 times this year with my sleeping bag and my best pajamas, refusing to leave until I got the support that we needed. And that's hard going. It knocks your self-esteem yourself. I think my dignity is kind of down the toilet at this stage, because you just have to fight and push, and all the time thinking, if I shout the loudest, that's great. I get the support from my son, but I also know there's somebody beside me shouting that needs that support as well. And am I taking it away from them? So, there's a lot that goes with it. And unfortunately, I do sometimes say that rural Ireland feels like District 12 in the Hunger Games. The services just, you have to fight for your life, and the services just don't exist, and the odds are never in our favour. And that's just the way it is, unfortunately, I'm finding. And it's, that doesn't in any way take away from the fact that I love living in Leitrim, but there are a lot of deficits in the service in Leitrim, Sligo, Roscommon, all of the surrounding areas. So it's been a tough few years.
Tell me a little bit before we finish up, and we just recap the book again. Just tell me a little bit about Team Hope, and also you want to talk about muscular dystrophy.
Yes, it's Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It's a couple of things that I wanted to get involved in, I suppose. The Team Hope, when I read the Facebook philosophy about the 8 weeks left to the end of the decade and make a difference, so I decided, right, I want to do something for myself, which was the book, and I wanted to do something for other people. So I'm involved now in Team Hope. We've collected over 1,000 shoe boxes to go. The particular ones from Leitrim are going to the poorer areas of Eastern Europe. So myself and a gentleman called David McKenna have been going around, and my dad as well. I have to give a shout out to him because he's just been dragged along every time my car is full, and he's made several trips over to the sorting office in Manor Hamilton. So that's been fantastic, and it's been such a lovely opportunity to go around to all of the schools, and I've had loads of the children coming out and helping me load up the car and telling me about all the wonderful things they've put in their boxes. I've dealt with ICA groups, I've dealt with active age groups as well, that people have been knitting. I went out to a lovely lady in Auckland who'd knitted this gorgeous little jumper, and the time and effort that people have put in, and the compassion that people have. And I think Team Hope is absolutely the right name for it, because it does make you very hopeful about all the negative things you see in the world. There is still that care and compassion out there. And then the second piece is there are 3 boys over in Roscommon, Archie, George and Isaac, who have a condition called Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and their mum Paula and their dad Porrig run Join Our Boys, which is a trust that they run to try and raise awareness of the condition, and also to fundraise towards a cure and to support these 3 boys as things change for them in the future. Now, I read their story many years ago, and for anybody, particularly a parent for these 3 brothers, it's a horror story, and unfortunately it isn't fiction, and they probably won't have a happy ending. And in reading their story, I very much felt I really want to do something to help this family. Like everybody else, I've sent my money in when they've done their fundraising days, but I just felt I needed to do something else. So I got in touch with their mum, Paula, who's fantastic. I was chatting to her before I came in this morning. We're very alike. We're both quite vocal and want to do everything we can to make some changes. But Paula and I have decided that we're going to work on a book, maybe 2 next year. We're going to work with her children and just work with other people maybe in the area with disabilities. And we want to look at it to tell people's stories, but not just focusing on their disabilities. I made a DVD a few years ago with my Autism Youth Club about raising awareness of people with autism in the local community, but not talking about their autism, just talking about them. Like one of the guys in my club is a silver medal holder in the World Championships for karate, various different things like that. So we're going to work on those books, and again, they will be self-published, but all the profits from them will go to the Join Our Boys Trust, and you can donate to them or find out more about them on joinourboys.org. So that's my plans for next year.
Fantastic. It's a very debilitating disease, and it affects the whole family. I know we've had Councillor Brendan Barry from Drumshambo talking to us about his son is also a sufferer from that condition. Faye, thank you so much for coming in to me and having a chat with me. Your book, of course, is Bedtime Stories from Mothers and Others. Yes. It's available online from next week.
From next week, yeah.
And
Sorry, if people want to like the blog or the Facebook page, then the links and everything to buy it next week. But I would really appreciate it as well if people got the chance to shop local and to go into the reading room, because I'm a huge fan of the reading room and I would love to see it being sold through there.
Perfectly. So that's Orla in the reading room. She'll know exactly what they're talking about when she walks in. She's excellent.
I've been pestering her for weeks.
Well, listen, Faye, thank you very much for joining us. Your book, Bedtime Stories for Mothers and Others, available online from next week, and in the reading room in Carrick-on-Shannon from the first week of December.
That's it. It'll be officially launched in January, but I thought I was being a bit cheeky and I thought it'd be a great stocking filler, so I'll get it out in December. Christmas is always a good time to make a few book sales. Thank you very much for dropping into me. Thank you so much. The very best of luck with the book. Thank you. This, of course, is episode 135 of the podcast, which, of course, you can catch on our website, leitrimdaily.com, but also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and now on YouTube. Since episode 100, we've been posting our episodes up there as well. I'll be back tomorrow with a roundup of the sports action of the weekend. And thanks once again to Faye for coming in. It's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you. And we will be back tomorrow. Talk to you then.